Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News, Saturday, September 7th, 9 a.m. And as the war for the intelligence of the United States continues to rage on, the dumbing down continues. There are some lights out there where the forces of socialism and the echo chamber are getting pushed back a little bit, but we're going to need a few more years. And what is going to happen there is we need more people that are doing their own podcast and their own Substack and Reddit and things like that to start applying again to the regular mainstream media, journals and magazines and things like that to try to get sensible thought or original thought, because the last 10 years very little original thought has occurred in a lot, and I'd say 75% of the policy magazines and some of the technical journals as well. It's just been more of the same, no new idea, don't rock the boat, and eventually you too could be the commodore of the yacht club. And these thoughts would not have gotten as far as they've gotten if it weren't for the gatekeepers, which are the junior manager at McDonald's. They're flipping burgers in a tie, but theoretically, they have a little bit of power. And they are the ones that are keeping a lot of people's ideas. I'd say myself off and on recently had a brush on it, but I said, let's make it a schoolhouse minute. Let's talk to people who have not been involved in things like this for years, who have never been published, who are trying to publish for the first time. And let me tell you, it was a lot harder in the good old days in the 80s and 90s because there wasn't electronic media. You really had to work and work on your craft, as they would say. I hate that term because I personally am not that crafty, but there were guys that were much older than myself who could write in many different styles because the newspaper world, the magazine world, things like that, a working writer wrote in many different genres to try to keep food on the table and liquor in the glass. Okay. That has been forgotten over the last few years as people are just, mouthing socialist platitudes over and over and over, or whatever the dumb idea is that everybody's still working on, which is why they get so upset when they see things that are being said today, like even in the big fight in the Fed is because of something very similar to that. We've talked about that already. So let's just get in for all of you younger people or newer people that are trying to get your work out there, and you're pretty sure your idea is good. You've worked on it. You have your hypothesis, as we said in the old days. Okay. Now, or you should know, every serious, I'm going to read through some of this because it has been written. That's what you do sometimes. You read scripts. Okay. If you were to sit here and do an hour freestyle, it would be interesting, but there's got to be a script in there to follow somewhere, or you meander as I used to meander at the beginning. Um, every serious writer is eventually going to run into these gatekeepers. It's not new. If you put ideas into the world, especially ideas that are at this point, because of the erasing of common history and common truth, which has happened last decade or so. If you are having ideas that cut across history or doctrine or institutions, you're going to get pushback. Think something that doesn't go with DEI. That would be the easiest one, right? If you were to say that it's body dysmorphia, or in the old days, you had to go through a battery of psychological tests before we cut your penis off. Stuff like that, you are going to run into gatekeepers immediately who say, that's not true. Although we know it is true and we can back it up, they will say it is not true. And now there you are, right? Because they have the ability to publish or not publish your work. So, what is new is the form that you're going to see that pushback increasingly take. It used to be your work was challenged on the substance of your work, okay? You could be wrong, you could be incomplete, you could even be controversial. But the argument was about the ideas. Does the thesis hold? Does the evidence support what we're talking about? Does the logic work? Okay. Lately, though, something else is happening, especially and I'll say from this because I'm just looking at these. When you're dealing with policy or defense spaces, instead of engaging arguments, some gatekeepers are policing the process. Not what you said, but how you said it. Not whether the idea is sound, but whether the work looks legitimate. And the term legitimate is a funny term these days because it doesn't mean what you think it means. And that shift matters more than people realize. And this is what we come to as you are seeing it crashing in waves across the United States and the world. Artificial intelligence has become the convenient symbol for this new type of gatekeeping, which is funny when you look at it. But let's be honest, it didn't create the instinct to keep you from getting in or keep you from getting your ideas published. It gave it a vocabulary because long before AI, there were always people who couldn't quite meet an argument head on, so they questioned your credentials, your tone, or your provenance instead. Sidebar, if you see a video that's out there of Jesus, what is his name? He's famous. I'll come back to him in a minute just for this reason. He's a very famous psychologist in Canada. We'll put it this way so we don't get in trouble. A very famous psychologist in Canada who early in his career decided he wasn't going to use pronouns and things of that nature. He was on a show up in Canada with this sad, evil, hollowed out little man with glasses who was telling him from a point of authority everything that was wrong with him and how he should be punished and this and that and the other thing. Now, the one fellow had a doctorate degree, granted it's psychology or something like, but it's a doctorate. The other fellow had a doctorate in medical history. Well, medical history is not medicine, okay? Anything you're writing in medical history is about the history of medicine. And those medical history doctorates out there, feel free to contact me and tell me how much you're just like a real doctor or you're just like a real head shrinker, and we will have that discussion. Okay. So, this is the kind of thing that's out there. You're going to find guys and women who are in a position to theoretically be the arbiter of your fate temporarily, and when you look up their biographies and you see that they've never done anything on their own and they've been part of certain things, or maybe they were given a fellow for a certain thing, which probably had to do with something else, then you're like, why am I being this and that? And this is a waste of a good thing because the reason you have to ridicule these people is not so much that they're doing it to keep their job and to promote themselves up, which they are doing. But while they are doing that, let's say you had a good novel example of a cure for cancer and it got shit canned because you couldn't get it past these people. And for some people, that's the only way for people to see things is through these journals. That's where the real damage is. Your hurt feelings is one thing. Having a good idea or a novel premise or this, that, or the other thing, that's what editors used to look for. Now, if this person doesn't let it get to an editor for a journal, then he's not helping the magazine itself, and the magazine should get rid of him or her. Otherwise, you become a rag. You become something to wrap fish in, as we used to say. So let's get back to the story. What's different now is how quickly suspicion replaces engagement because the guys that are doing this job are not usually editors or talent scouts or things of that nature. It's usually an entry position. In the old days, the old editors you'd see in the movie with the cigar and yelling at Peter Parker and all that shit, those guys knew how to edit books and news articles and things like that. And if you always recall, and this is the funny thing when you'll hear that I don't think this is completely your work, I have seen, and you have seen as well from certain authors, and especially in screenplays, my friends, where they have taken my work and they have changed it around so much that I barely recognize it, right? Does that mean that that fellow didn't write the thing? He's credited with it. Should we take the credit away from everybody and give it all to Henry Hill or whoever else it is? Who knows, right? So now, if you're using editorial tools from something like the artificial intelligence, okay, or you have some other kind of software editing programs and things like that, even like I said, even AI, do what tools have always done. It's just like getting the typewriter, right? It's just another tool. They compress the language, they speed up the process, they clarify the idea because you have that extra moment. I can change it. I don't have to go back and, have my secretary read it or listen to my dictaphone. They reduce friction between thought and expression. Okay. Sometimes have you ever said, I wish I could type as fast or I wish I could do whatever as fast as I can think it or say it, which is why podcasts are so popular. Not just because people listen to it, but it is easier for you who didn't take typing in high school because they don't offer it anymore, than sit there and write it down because you'll say, I've lost my train of thought, right? Has anybody ever said that? Okay. So you're taking these tools and you're using them to facilitate the project that you are doing. Okay. They do not generate experience, any of these tools. They do not create doctrine. They do not substitute for judgment. Okay. Ideas still come from people, and responsibility still rests with authors. They're making it sound, and you can do this because you'll see, I won't say Yahoo News, but if you have something that's constantly attacking President Trump, what'll normally happen in a situation, somebody has written an article, then you take the article and you put it over into your AI system or whatever you have, and you say, write the same thing with different words, and it will do so. And then you do 15 copies of it, and there are 15 new articles about how bad President Trump is. That's what AI can do as far as generating articles. If it has nothing to work from, it does not develop things on its own. Go to the image maker systems and things like that, and you'll see if you say draw a balloon, does it ask you a question or does it just give you pretty much like a stock thing over and over again, right? It does not give you those animated, incredible graphic videos that you'll see on TikTok and on Instagram, where it's like just really disturbia, sci-fi kind of stuff. That's somebody who is working very hard with programs to use that AI to its best extents. Okay. And I'm harping on AI now because there's very few other editing and compression, or even for certain research. Because if you're involved in the law, there is a law AI. Okay. There are systems out there to help you speed up your research and to provide you with more accurate research and sometimes quotations as you need it. And that'll be the other thing. If you go along, this is getting a little long, but this is for people. I'm trying to help you guys out here. If you're just writing personal opinion, you don't have to have any quotes. It's my opinion that this is occurring. Now, if there's something in there that you're saying, oh, there's 250,000 people that love rye whiskey. Now, where did you get the number? And you can put in wherever you got the number. Now, if it's in your opinion, not really the big part of the argument, and you say, come up, pull me, I know it's out there, just give me the average American spirits or whoever it is that's in charge of that. Boom. And then some joker is looking and says, oh, all these attributes are Wiki. Remember the old days, it was Wikipedia. Everybody was using Wikipedia as the truth. There are a lot of first tier references that are going to come up in your papers that would signal that it was sourced by an artificial intelligence. And that's true because that's what was done, because it was supporting evidence to your central theme. It wasn't generate falsehoods to go and support my central theme. You understand? So the people that are telling you the AI story a lot of the times are being dishonest to some level about we don't want to see it. Because if you can tell me right now, anybody out there who edits their own stuff sits down there with the green eye shade and goes through it. My favorite person on that, and he still probably does it, but he does have an editor, is James Elroy. He's a fictional writer. He's not a fictional writer. He writes fiction. He writes it longhand with, I think, a pencil on copybook paper, and he has an editor over at Knopf, and that's how things are done. All right. And the editor's got ahead of a hell of a time if you ever read through a James Elroy book. Okay. So, yeah, certain people, but Elroy is a very well paid, well regarded, high end, making money for the company guy. You, me, and somebody's cousin are not the same. If you see the difference in the quality of presentations, even in the Reddits and the Substacks and things like that from today, when I first started doing this, which was in the late 80s, when they were the independent magazines or the zines or whatever you want to call them, it'd be skater stuff or, punk rock music, things like that. A lot of people of my era started out there. Okay. You started uh, record reviews, shit like that. And then your friend who had some class or was at the arts college would put it all together. And they were still doing, I guess, galleys and things like that, doing real layouts, take it to a printer. The subscriptions actually had to go out in the mail. You did get real responses, real feedback because people were waiting, a month for this thing to come out. And they paid whatever it was, $2, some fucking ridiculous fee. Everything was just at cost. So you paid $2 or $3 for this thing. Came in the mail. You read through it. If you liked something, you mentioned it. If you didn't like something, you didn't mention it. And at that time, if you started out in that indie rock alternate press thing, as we did, to get into Tower Books, Tower Records and Books was the thing. And eventually, the one magazine that I was a contributor to got in there, and it was a big fucking thing. It was a big thing. And I got a review in one of the issues, which was the biggest thing that I have ever had, even though I've done other things. The biggest thing in my mind to this day is still getting that review from Tower Records and Books because it meant a lot more when we were sitting down and really, jamming with this stuff. Now, you still have the beliefs, you're still doing what has to be done, but you have too many people that are picking it apart because there's always somebody with no talent out there. And you could say, I don't have any talent. And I'll just tell you to go fuck yourself because I've written more, 200 and some articles or something more. There's more than that. But I have done it in part time because I've had to have a real job. And I don't fault anybody for that. So everybody out there who's doing this kind of stuff part time, always think it's going to be part time. If you realize how the whole podcast system really works, and I'm not saying it in a conspiratorial manner, it is gamed just the way it would be to be on television. There are a million pilots, one pilot gets through. There is no difference now than there was when it's television. If you're not doing what you like to do, then don't do it. If you're trying to show that you are a very professional uh, bit of work, which we do on the regular website, if you'll see, we have things written in many different types of modes, not just opinion, but in security briefing, things like that. We have a lot of different versions that we do things in because it's good to show that you can do it. And a lot of that is going to play into, for those of you who want to be a professional, like I said, you have to have many voices. People that are saying, I don't see your real voice in this. Well, it's a technical article, right? I'm writing a technical article on how to paint the porch. Lord Tennyson, if you remember, was not famous for his 600 stanzas on how to paint the porch, right? Same thing. The guy who writes stuff for it used to be Popular Science or Popular Mechanics, I don't expect him to break out in haiku or to give me the story of Pequod, right? Because they are different voices for different times, and certain things are acceptable in certain places. The same if you write for a military journal, you'll use all the stuff that those dimwits have to have in there to make it sound like something that they can understand. Likewise with the think tank people, likewise with the whoever. It's always that. There are differences in how things are presented and differences in how this work has to be done. If you want to be an artist, then that's great. If you want to write a paper on why they have to save the loggerhead turtle up the street here and stop letting idiots run them over with their cars, you're better off writing it in a manner that somebody on the city council is going to be able to read it and realize that you're saying that they should be sued until they do it the right way. Okay? Sometimes saying that you should be sued until you do it the right way is not the right way to say it. It would be the same thing with this example. To go and say to that guy, well, I'm going to talk to somebody who works above you, and I'm really going to tell them what a piece of shit you are because I can. Now, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't tell them that. You would just do it and be done with it, right? So, those are examples of things that can be done. Do not get unhappy if you get these things. There used to be a fellow, I can't remember his name now, he's a very famous writer. He had all of his rejection slips, and a lot of them were framed because of the magazines. I remember when we first were involved, there used to be you'd buy a book, and the book would tell you the names of everybody from all the magazines and what the requirements were and things like that. Now, if everybody said I can't take anything that's been edited or moved around or compressed because I think AI has been involved, there'd be no fucking papers out there right now. You would be reading stuff from the 1940s. It'd be old-timey news, right? Because that's what happens when you don't keep up with the technology that is available for the publishing industry. That's what happened to publishing in general. Okay. So I hope some of this makes sense. I would say to all of you who are still trying to get out there and get things, I'll tell you what, it's a motherfucker even to get stuff in the newspaper. When we've had politically charged things, and we've had politically charged things around here, and it was important to be known because at some point Doge actually came into our county over it. Florida Doge came in down here. The local newspaper was like, we cannot continue to put this stuff of yours in there because you're sending something every week. Well, you know what? There is a crime occurring consistently in our area, and it's still happening every week. They were like, you could put it in once a month. So you would have had to get three other people to put your other three parts of your investigative journalism into the local paper because the big paper here, Sun Sentinel, won't print anything against the Democrats. And the little paper up the street also is the same way, but they're never sure where the hell they're going, right? So they don't want to be caught being friends with guys that are criminals, whereas Sun Sentinel doesn't care. So I mean that's a funny bit of it all. I haven't been down there. We're joking about it. Oh, there you go. Here's something funny. I'll cover this part up. Pen and Pencil Club, right? That means you're a journalist or you're a bike messenger. Thought that was funny. You get a kick out of it. If you're ever in Philadelphia, Pen and Pencil Club, stop in, tell them you're a bike messenger or a writer of some type. 1522 Latimer Street. Give it a shot. I'm sure they'll appreciate me doing that. So where were we? Okay. So these institutions, right? They are rewarding process policing instead of substantive critiques. Sometimes it's something quite quiet but dangerous happens. Writers are going to learn to be careful. They're going to stay narrow, which means homogenous ideas, and are going to avoid synthesis and they're going to echo the consensus rather than risk originality. At a time when it doesn't cost anything to put anything online, I could see being cautious back when we had, a $2 magazine cost $500,000 to produce at Curtis Publishing or something like that. You know, the big giant printing machines. Now, what's your investment an online newspaper or something? $100 maybe for the year? You know, grow up. That's the problem. They are stifling any kind of creative thought because mainstream thought, which is socialist thought at this point, is the norm. They don't want to risk what little margins they have on money coming in, or maybe they don't have sponsors or they won't have sponsors. And you have to say to yourself, do I put out a decent thing where if I had it as a newsletter, would I be able to charge $1 a year for it? If I have 50,000 viewers, which we don't, and I charge them all $1, well, that covers our entire budget, right? That's the stuff that people look at. Do you want your story out there for the maximum amount of people to see it? Because you won't get it if you pay those charges to Facebook or Rumble or any of those guys. They don't do what they say. We used the one at BitChute for X amount of years, paid in advance, never got pushed up in the lineup. Okay. So it's all just bullshit. But these guys are even worse because here you should be able to get back into the mainstream stuff because your ideas, hopefully, compared to socialism, are groundbreaking. And it's valuable work if you can get in there. Okay. And rapid reaction commentary is not what changes policy, does not change strategy, and does not change the law. Slow thinking, integrative, thinking. All right. If someone's saying, well, we've got to just go out there like they do with this like Mandami guy, and I'm just use him as a because he's the greatest example of a 30-year-old baby I've ever seen. If I'm going to tax them and they're going to leave, I'm going to seize their property and then I'm going to tax them anyway. None of that shit means anything. He can say it because he knows that his base is also a bunch of 30-year-old babies, right? But you know just from being a human, hopefully, that that doesn't even make sense that you could do it. Now you just look up the information. You say to yourself, my thesis is he's a complete liar. There has to be a number of state, city, and federal laws that say you're not allowed to seize people's property by using excessive taxation to drive them to the point where they want to leave because they're not declaring bankruptcy, right? What would be the places to look? And then let's say you put it into your AI. I have no problem with that because you knew what you wanted. You just had a problem going where to look. Because I'll tell you what, if you go to a library in Broward County, there used to be one good one, which was in our town. And then when the lady who put it together, who was a volunteer who put our entire library together on her own, when she retired, they brought some simple bitch in, and the place is a liberal beehive, right? Nothing gets done there now. You're to find a good research library is hen's teeth, baby, as they say. So you go with what you can get and you mark down that you have used it. And if you mark down what you have used, then there is no question as to what was done. And I think that that's why I've been going on with this. The young writers, because they don't have any of the history, like I'm saying, they can't. You're going to feel this pressure the most. I've seen it happen, from a number of people. I'll tell a guy, well, you really have this. Why don't you start with a podcast, and then as you develop your skills of phrasing and things like that, then yeah, you go forward and why don't you write something up? So drafts, they're getting shelved. The ideas are getting softened. Well, I can't get that idea in because they yell about it. Well, then keep that for your online. Ambitious projects I know in this area have gotten abandoned just because of that kind of stuff. Not because they're wrong, but because the cost of being questioned gets to be a point where it feels too high. A lot of people are not from the background. I never liked public speaking. I've had to do it a lot, and I don't like it. I don't like people who don't have the same qualifications in a field that I have telling me about my qualifications in a field. If I don't know what the field is, I will defer to you. That's called being a fucking adult. All right. So you say to yourself, what's going to be the solution for this, you younger people that are getting into this? If you're in your mid 20s, work through it. I was very impressed with Harvard University's conservative group, the Salient. Met them in Palm Beach last year, I guess it was. Nice group of people, really trying to do the right thing, not a piece of shit like I'm saying in the group, as far as all ideas were on the table and just how well do you present your argument. That's all they want to do. All right. So, what's going to be a solution for you younger people is not going to be to abandon your standards. Okay. Institutions themselves need to have some rigor, and the editors need to get some judgment. And if they don't have judgment, then people have to make sure that people that are in control of them understand what the story is. You cannot have a situation where rigor means interrogating the arguments. Not, I'm sorry, rigor would mean interrogating the arguments, not impugning the legitimacy by default, you know? So judgment is going to be asking whether a thesis advances an understanding, not whether it conforms to a preferred stylistic or procedural narrative. And yes, part of this was re-edited by AI because it made more sense to do that because it was faster. But it was my idea being put into that little change there with my changes. And no, you should not be called out to show any of your original work because a professional doesn't do that. You would be better to say, fuck you, I won't write for your rag if this is your attitude, especially when you go back and see that they themselves have never published or never published anything significant, right? Those are the worst things. Those group papers, unless it's something that is major in scale, like you see in the college, like some of the college things where it's an international poverty scale or something where they had to go and do things, but not for individual thought. That's showing you the hidebound, we use the term hidebound, school of thought in the academic journals that people don't even read anymore, but some rich guy died alone and left the money, so they keep this thing going. So that's going to be pretty much where, we're talking about here. Everybody don't get upset about it. You're going to have these issues. I'm not saying that everybody's a Hemingway, but sit back and do that schoolhouse moment when if you get your thing back from them. A lot of places are smart. They just never get you, they never send it back. It's not like the old days. They used to just send you the paper back with a rejection on it or something. That was one thing. To you're better off not explaining why you're not taking them. So you're not taking them at this time. That's it. Don't be that guy who writes something adversarial because it's not necessary. Okay. That's showing the mentality of that person. You aren't going to be that person. You'll motherfuck them and this and that and the other thing for 2 or 3 days, be mad. And that's fine. Everybody's going to do that. But keep at it. I see there's a lot of really decent writers out there, not that anyone gives a shit if you say that they're good, but there's some good writers out there. They just have to get into the right groove. They have to understand the languages that are going to be used are not always your own voice, this famous voice thing. Once again, because Hemingway is Hemingway, if you're a Hemingway person. Hunter S. Thompson is Hunter S. Thompson. You don't see him writing a how to build a lawn cart or something like that because that's not his thing. So you decide, do you want to be a professional writer who writes, or do you want to be a starving artist who is discovered after he's dead? It's up to you. So that's about it. Hopefully, some of it made sense. Any questions or comments? www.southfloridaconservative.com. We are on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Substack, and I don't know what else we're on. We're on all those things and Ritalin. So have a good day. Excellent weekend to you, and goodbye.